I stared at the screen, my morning coffee forgotten on the kitchen island. The subject line of the email from my daughter Sarah was painfully corporate. Mom, it's time to discuss your living situation. We found a retirement home for you. I read it twice. Not a phone call, not a visit, an email. I am 68 in perfect health and fully capable of maintaining my 3-bedroom home in Seattle. Yet Sarah and her husband Jason had decided my time of independence was up. They had attached a glossy brochure of Sunrise Meadows, highlighting the assisted care facilities and, most importantly, the financial breakdown. I knew exactly what this was about. Jason's contracting business had been bleeding money for 2 years. They needed a bailout, and my paid-off house was sitting on a gold mine of equity. I didn't cry. I didn't write a long, emotional reply asking why my only daughter was trying to push me out of my own home. I took a sip of my cold coffee and got to work. I made a phone call. I set up an appointment with my attorney and put my house in an irrevocable trust. It was a simple administrative step, but it cemented one fact: the house was mine, and no one could force a sale. Next, I logged into my banking app. Years ago, I had added Sarah to a secondary checking account for emergencies. I transferred all the funds into my primary individual account and closed the joint one. I wiped the counter, cleaned my hands steady. I had spent my life raising her, supporting her, and grieving my late husband. I was not about to become a victim of her financial mismanagement. I typed a 2-word reply to her email: "Come over." The next day, my daughter showed up at my door, and the real game began. The doorbell rang at exactly noon. Sarah and Jason stood on my front porch, armed with thick manila folders and forced smiles. "Mom!" Sarah reached out for a hug. I gave her a brief pat on the back and stepped aside. "Come in. Wipe your shoes, Jason." Jason cleared his throat, rubbing his boots on the mat. He looked nervous, clutching the folders tightly. We sat in the living room. The room my husband and I had decorated together, filled with real oak furniture and sunlight, not the sterile beige they were trying to push me into. "We're so glad you were open to meeting." Sarah started leaning forward. "We've been so worried about you in this big house all by yourself. The stairs, the maintenance." "I ran 3 miles this morning, Sarah," I replied, crossing my legs. Jason jumped in, his tone overly professional. "It's about being proactive, Nora. We found a place that handles all the yard work, the meals, everything. And if we sell this house now, the market is peaking. You could afford a beautiful unit and have plenty left over to invest." Invest. That was the magic word. "Invest in what?" I asked, keeping my voice level. "Your failing contracting business." Jason's face flushed. Sarah gasped, her hand flying to her chest. "Mom, that is incredibly offensive. We are trying to help you. You are getting older, and it's dangerous for you to be here alone." "I'm perfectly safe," I corrected. "But I'm glad you brought up the house. It's good we're having this chat." I watched their eyes light up. They thought I was yielding. They thought they had won. "So you'll look at the brochures." Sarah handed the folder across the coffee table. I didn't take it. I just looked at her, noting the expensive new designer bag sitting at her feet. "No, I won't be needing them," I stated. The smiles on their faces faltered. "But you just said it was good we were talking about the house." Jason argued, his polite facade cracking. "It is," I nodded, "because you need to understand where things stand. Yesterday, I put this house into an irrevocable trust." Silence filled the room. The grandfather clock in the hallway ticked loud and steady. Sarah blinked, uncomprehending. "A trust. What does that mean?" "It means the house cannot be sold," I explained calmly. "Not by me, not by you, not by anyone. I will live here until I pass away. And after that, it goes directly to my grandson Leo." Leo was my son, Julian's boy. Julian lived in Texas and never once asked me for a dime. Jason stood up so fast his knee knocked against the coffee table. Are you out of your mind? You locked up an $800,000 asset for a teenager. It's my asset to lock up. I remained seated entirely unbothered by his rising voice. Mom, you can't do this. Sarah's voice spiked an octave. We were counting on… we need to make sure you are taken care of. I am taking care of myself by ensuring no one views my home as a retirement fund for their bad debts. I looked at Jason. I know about the second mortgage you took out, Jason. I know you're drowning. Sarah turned bright red. You have no right to snoop into our finances. And you have no right to schedule my move to a nursing home, I countered. We are done here. Take your brochures and leave. Sarah grabbed her expensive bag, her hands shaking with rage. You're being selfish. Family is supposed to help family. I'm being smart, I corrected. They stormed out, slamming the front door behind them. I locked it. But as I turned away, I noticed something missing from the console table. My spare house key, usually kept in the ceramic bowl by the door, was gone. I didn't panic. I didn't run out into the street screaming, and I certainly didn't waste time calling anyone to report a stolen key. I simply walked into the kitchen and picked up my phone. Within an hour, a local locksmith was at my house. He replaced the front door, back door, and garage locks with heavy-duty smart locks. I paid him in cash, tested my new keypad, and felt a profound sense of security. While the locksmith worked, my phone buzzed. It was an automated alert from my bank. An attempted withdrawal of $5,000 from the joint account had failed. Sarah was moving fast. She had tried to drain the emergency fund right after leaving my house. Fortunately, I had emptied and closed that account before she even arrived. I brewed a fresh cup of tea and sat on the porch. The autumn breeze was crisp. For years, I had made excuses for Sarah's entitlement. I blamed it on her growing up without her father or on the pressure of keeping up with Jason's flashy lifestyle. But at 68, I was out of excuses to give. My phone rang again. This time, it was Julian, my eldest son. Mom! His deep voice came through the speaker. Sarah just called me in hysterics. She said you're losing your mind and giving the house away to strangers. I chuckled softly. Strangers, I put it in a trust for your son, Leo. Julian paused. Wait, she said you signed it over to a cult. I shook my head, admiring my blooming hydrangeas. Sarah is upset because she and Jason wanted to force me into assisted living and sell my house to pay their debts. I put a stop to it. Julian sighed deeply. Do you need me to fly out? No, Julian. I have it entirely under control, I assured him. Are you sure? Julian sounded worried, but also distinctly tired of his sister's drama. She was screaming about getting power of attorney, saying you aren't competent. Let her try, I answered smoothly. I just renewed my driver's license, passed a physical with flying colors last week, and manage my own stock portfolio. I am perfectly fine. How is Leo doing in his classes? We shifted the conversation to his family, talking about normal things. When I hung up, I felt a deep sense of peace. I had a good son. I had a good life. I wasn't going to let one greedy child ruin my golden years. That evening, I cooked myself a nice salmon dinner and settled on the couch with a mystery novel. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet I had learned to cherish since my husband passed. Around 9:30 p.m., I heard a car pull into my driveway. The headlights swept across my living room window. I didn't turn on the porch light. I just moved the curtain slightly and watched. It was Jason's truck. Sarah stepped out carrying an empty cardboard box. Jason followed closely behind. They walked up to my front door, trying to keep their voices down. I heard the unmistakable metallic scrape of a key sliding into a lock. Then a pause. More rattling. A quiet curse from Jason. They were trying to use the spare key they had stolen earlier today. They thought they could sneak in while I was asleep and start packing my things, or worse, taking valuables to pawn. The rattling stopped. "It's not turning," Sarah whispered loudly. I smiled, turned on the porch light from the inside switch, and walked toward the door. It was time to set a permanent boundary. I opened the door, leaving the heavy security chain in place. Sarah and Jason jumped backwards, startled by the sudden light and my appearance. Jason quickly hid the useless key in his jacket pocket, while Sarah nearly dropped the empty cardboard box. "Good evening," I greeted, leaning against the doorframe. "A bit late for a visit, isn't it?" "Mom!" Sarah forced a laugh, her eyes darting around nervously. We thought you might need help sorting through some old things in the attic." At almost 10 o'clock at night, I raised an eyebrow. "With a key you stole off my console table this afternoon." Jason stepped forward, trying to look imposing. "Nora, you changed the locks. That's a serious safety hazard. What if there's an emergency and we need to get in?" "If there's a medical emergency, the paramedics will break the door down," I replied flatly. "If there's a financial emergency in your household, that is no longer my problem." "Mom, open the door," Sarah demanded, her fake sweetness vanishing. "We need to talk. You emptied the joint account. That was supposed to be our safety net." "It was my money from my pension," I corrected. "You tried to withdraw $5,000 this afternoon, Sarah. Don't lie to me." She turned pale, realizing I got the bank alerts. "We need that money, Nora!" Jason finally cracked his voice, desperate. "The bank is threatening foreclosure on our house. We are out of time." "Then you should start packing." I pointed at the box in Sarah's hands. "Looks like you already have a head start." Sarah glared at me, pure venom in her eyes. "You would really let your own daughter lose her home. You were perfectly willing to let me lose mine," I stated, staring right back. The silence on the porch was deafening. Jason looked down at his boots, defeated, while Sarah's face contorted with anger. "It's different," Sarah yelled, no longer caring if the neighbors heard. "You're old. You don't need a 3-bedroom house. We have a whole life ahead of us, and you're hoarding wealth." "I am living in the home I worked 40 years to pay off," I replied, my voice dangerously calm. "I am not hoarding wealth. I am surviving. If you wanted a paid-off house, you should have lived within your means instead of buying expensive cars and designer bags." "You are a terrible mother," she spat out. "I was a very generous mother. Until you decided I was just an ATM waiting to die." I unlatched the chain and stepped forward just enough to push the screen door closed. "Do not come back to this house uninvited. Do not try to access my accounts. If you need financial advice, hire an accountant. Good night." I shut the solid oak door in her face and threw the deadbolt. I stood in the hallway for a moment, waiting for the guilt to hit me. Mothers are supposed to feel guilty when they deny their children right. Society tells us we should sacrifice until we have nothing left. But I felt absolutely nothing but relief. A heavy, toxic weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I heard Jason's truck start and speed out of the driveway. The next morning, I went to my safe deposit box at the local bank branch. I removed a few pieces of antique jewelry that had belonged to my grandmother. Sarah had always eyed them. I packed them up and mailed them via insured delivery to Julian's wife in Texas. If Sarah wanted to play dirty, I was going to make sure the board was completely cleared of pieces. 2 weeks passed without a word from Sarah. No texts, no calls. I spent my days gardening, volunteering at the library, and enjoying my peace. Then, on a Tuesday afternoon, a shiny silver Lexus pulled into my driveway. A woman in a sharp blazer stepped out holding a clipboard. Behind her, Sarah emerged from the passenger side. I was planting tulips in the front yard wearing my gardening gloves and a wide-brimmed hat. Mom. Sarah walked up, her tone brisk and professional. This is Brenda. She's a real estate agent. We just wanted to do a quick walkthrough to get an estimate. For future reference, of course. Brenda offered a bright, overly enthusiastic smile. Hi, Nora. Sarah has told me so much about this lovely property. We won't take much of your time, just want to check the square footage. I slowly stood up, dusting the dirt off my knees. I looked at Brenda. Brenda, let me save you some time, I said pleasantly. I am the sole owner of this property. It is currently held in an irrevocable trust. It is not for sale, it will never be for sale during my lifetime, and my daughter has absolutely no legal authority to show it to you. Brenda's smile froze. She turned to look at Sarah. Sarah. You said you had power of attorney and were prepping for an estate sale. Sarah stammered, her face turning crimson. She's not thinking clearly, Brenda. We just need a preliminary number. I am thinking perfectly clearly, I interrupted. Brenda, you are trespassing on private property. I kindly ask you to leave before things get unpleasant. Brenda was a professional. She instantly recognized a liability when she saw one. I am so sorry, ma'am. I was misinformed. She spun around, marched straight back to her Lexus, and got in. Sarah was left standing on the grass, alone. Brenda drove away without looking back, leaving Sarah stranded in my driveway. How could you do that? Sarah demanded, stomping her foot like a toddler. I promised Jason I could at least get an appraisal so we could take a loan against our future inheritance. Your future inheritance is zero, Sarah, I said, peeling off my gardening gloves. And you cannot take a loan against a house you do not own. You have no heart, she screamed. Jason is filing for bankruptcy next week. We are losing our house. Then you will have to rent an apartment, get jobs that pay regular wages, and start over. I walked past her toward my front porch. Millions of people do it every day. You are not above hard work. I hate you, she cried, real tears finally spilling down her cheeks. No, you hate that you can no longer control me, I corrected without looking back. I went inside, locked the door, and left her standing in the driveway. She had to call Jason to come pick her up. I watched from the window as he arrived 20 minutes later. They argued on the front lawn before finally driving away. That afternoon, I gathered the last few boxes of Sarah's childhood things. High school yearbooks, old trophies, a box of sweaters she had left in the guest room. I packed them neatly, taped them shut, and paid a local courier service to deliver them to her address. I included a small handwritten note inside the top box. These belong to you. The house belongs to me. Do not contact me until you are ready to be a daughter, not a debt collector. Mom. It was the hardest thing I had ever done, but also the most necessary. I was finally cutting the cord. 6 months later, the air was warm with the arrival of spring. My front garden was a riot of color. The tulips I had planted that fateful afternoon were in full bloom. I sat on my porch swing, a cup of fresh coffee in hand, listening to the birds. Julian and his family had visited over Thanksgiving. The house had been filled with laughter, the smell of roasted turkey, and the sound of my grandson Leo playing the piano in the living room. It felt like a home, again, not a battleground. I heard through the grapevine, mostly from my gossiping neighbor Martha, that Sarah and Jason had lost their house. They were renting a small 2-bedroom apartment across town. Jason was working for a commercial construction company, and Sarah had taken a job as a receptionist at a dental clinic. They were surviving, just as I had told them they would. Sarah hadn't called me. I hadn't called her. Some might view that as a tragedy, a broken family, but sitting here on my porch, I didn't feel broken. I had repainted the kitchen. I had joined a local book club that met on Thursday evenings. I managed my own finances, cooked my own meals, and slept soundly through the night without the fear of someone trying to sneak in and steal my future. I had drawn a line in the sand, and I had stood my ground. I didn't need to fight them in a courtroom, and I didn't need to beg for their respect. I simply stopped giving them the keys to my life. I took a sip of my coffee, the morning sun warming my face. I was 68, independent, and absolutely free. And my house. It was still exactly where it belonged, and so was I. Going through this taught me a hard but necessary truth. You can't set yourself on fire just to keep someone else warm, even if that someone is your own child. Setting boundaries doesn't mean you love your kids any less. It just means you respect yourself enough to protect your peace. We spend decades building our lives, our homes, and our security, and we should never feel guilty for wanting to live out our golden years on our own terms. Sometimes, the best thing you can do for an entitled adult child is to step back and let them figure life out for themselves. Has anyone else ever had to draw a tough line with family or deal with a similar situation? I'd love to hear your experiences down in the comments below. Reading your stories always reminds me that none of us are truly alone in these struggles. If you found some value in my story today, please give this video a thumbs up, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button to join our community for more real-life stories. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.